Hello everyone, we're back with another experiment. In front of you, you're looking at a 1996 Dodge Ram dump truck with the Cummins diesel engine. We're going to do an experiment to determine the engine RPM based on the frequency of the exhaust. So my brother, you remember him from the last video, he will be recording the exhaust. I'm going to hold it at 2 different RPMs, and to make sure we got accurate reading, we're going to be using the Autel to, instead of the tachometer, to record what the RPM is, and then we will not tell him what it is. He will determine it from the recording of the exhaust. So let's get going. Okay, here we go. Goes in gear.
I wasn't standing there. No, you didn't have it reversed. Yeah, I don't know if the camera is.
Okay, engine running.
Okay, so now we'll do the analysis portion. I will just start with a disclaimer. For this particular experiment, all of this theory and calculations is just something that I came up with. This is not something I researched or found. This is kind of just what I had rationalized, trying to figure out what to do. So please do not think that this is some accepted standard formula that everybody uses. This is something that I completely made up and wanted to verify. So the first thing we want to do is say, well, when I'm hearing an exhaust note, what is it I'm actually hearing? So we know for a typical internal combustion engine, here we have cylinder going up and down, and every time the exhaust valve opens, we have high pressure gas that escapes through that valve and goes out through the exhaust system. So every time a valve opens, I have this sudden release of high pressure gas. And if you could listen to an engine running very, very slowly, every time that exhaust valve opened, you would hear psst, psst, psst. Okay? But now you put many cylinders into an engine and you run the engine very quickly. And now instead of hearing all those individual pressure releases, your brain now interprets that very fast noise as being an actual tone. So you hear a sound rather than a series of very fast pulses. And the frequency of that tone is just how often the exhaust valve is opening. So in theory, if I can determine how often the exhaust valve is opening, then I will know the speed of the engine, and how often the exhaust valve is opening is directly related to the frequency of that tone. So the equations for that would look like this. Okay, So if I want to know what would be the expected frequency for an engine that's running, well, I start out with N. N is kind of a standard letter for rotational speed. I don't know why, but it always is. So I say I have N revolutions per minute associated with this engine. Then I'm going to multiply that by the number of cylinders, and I just called that letter V, and I chose that because N was taken. But you talk about your car being a V8 or a V10, so I thought, hey, V is kind of a good letter to use for the number of cylinders. So if you have an 8-cylinder engine, V would be 8. Now for a typical 4-cycle engine, we have to remember that the exhaust valve does not open once every revolution for a particular cylinder. It only opens every other revolution. So in this equation, I then need to multiply by 1 exhaust stroke divided by 2 revolutions. So 1 stroke for every 2 revolutions. Then I have speed here in revolutions per minute, but I want my frequency to be in hertz, which is cycles per second. So I have to divide by 60 to get this back into cycles per second. So if I simplify this whole expression down into something really neat, frequency is really just N times V over 120. And in this case, I don't really want to solve for frequency. I know the frequency and I want to solve for the speed. So I can rearrange this equation and say speed is just frequency times 120 divided by the number of cylinders. In this particular experiment, the truck we used was a 6-cylinder diesel. So speed will actually be frequency times 120 over 6, or frequency times 20. So what I'm going to do is try to determine the frequency that we measured during the experiment, multiply it by 20, and that should be the speed in RPM. Okay, I'll just mention the reason we chose the vehicle we did was because of all the ones at our disposal. That particular vehicle had the loudest exhaust note, so we thought that would be the easiest one to pick out and actually do something that we could measure. Alright, so we're going to go back to our friend, the fast Fourier transform. And we introduced this in the previous video, but in case you did not see that video, I will give you just a quick rundown of what the fast Fourier transform is. It's also called an FFT. But over here, this block on the upper right, this is a fast Fourier transform, and what this is doing is it's looking at all the sounds that are being picked up, in this case by the microphone built into the laptop. And on the x-axis is the actual frequency, and it goes from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. And on the y-axis is the amplitude. So the point is, all these different frequencies are being picked up right now. These are all the things that are happening in the room, and this is the relative level of each. Now if I have a particular tone that is well above the ambient noise of everything else, I can generate one right now. You can see that stands out on the FFT as a spike. Okay, and as that frequency changes, that spike moves to the left for low notes, or to the right for very high notes. Okay? So by looking at a spike on this particular plot, I can see where it lies, left versus right, and then from there determine its actual frequency. So I'm going to do that, but now I need to make a few changes. The first thing I have to do is I have to set this up so that it now looks at a recording rather than looking at the internal microphone of the PC, or the Mac in this case. I'm also going to want some really good accuracy here. What I showed you before is that the engine speed is going to be the frequency times 20. So if I'm off by only 1 hertz in my measurement, that's a 20 RPM error in my calculation. So I'm going to do some things here to make this fast Fourier transform be a little more accurate. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the range from, instead of 20 to 20,000 hertz, I'm just going to look at 20 to 200 hertz. That should be well within the operating range of this engine. If it was above 200 hertz, I would be well above redline and the engine would not be able to go there. Then I'm also going to take out one of the channels. Right now this is a stereo analysis. I'm going to remove the right channel and look just at the left channel. And the reason I'm doing that is because I'm trying to free up processing power. Because now when I go to the analysis mode, currently with the way I have it set up, my frequency resolution is only about 2.7 hertz. I want this to be as tight as I can, so I'm going to crank this up. Now I'm within about an accuracy of 0.7 of a hertz. But that is a huge burden on the processor, and that's going to slow this thing down a bunch. So you're going to see this thing operating much slower. So by taking out the right channel, I'm hoping to free up some processing power. I'm also going to disable all these other meters on here and stick just with the fast Fourier transform, and everything else is not important at the moment. So that'll go away. And here I have just my FFT, and I'm going to open up my player, and now I'm going to play my recordings and try to pick out that exhaust note. So I'll do the first one we did here. You can see how slow this is reacting now because it's processing with much tighter resolution than what I had before. Right here is the fundamental. Engine speeds up, and I'm going to freeze it. Right about there. Okay. So what I was saying before is you see several spikes here. This first one is the fundamental. This is the lowest major tone that we have, right? If I look at the frequency of that, that is right about, looking at about 60.2 hertz. I'm going to blow this up a little bit. Actually right at about 60 hertz. These other spikes here are overtones. So you can see this one is at 60. I have another one over here at 120, which is exactly twice as much. And I probably have another one over here at 240. Those are overtones of this fundamental tone. And those are what make a particular pitch sounds like it does. So for example, a trumpet and a piano can play the same note, yet they sound different. That's because of these additional overtones. Okay, they're always integer multiples of the bass tone. What you want to have here for our experiment is the lowest tone, the one furthest to the left. That will be our fundamental, and that's what the speed of the engine should relate to. So again, I'm getting an answer of about right at 60 hertz for this thing. So when I multiply 60 hertz times 120, times 20. I think this was running about 1200 RPM. Okay. Just for laughs, I'm going to play this one more time because it does move around a little bit. So let's go back to this first one. Here we're idling. So this fundamental is pretty low. Now he accelerates the engine. And it's moved over here. So it is bouncing around a bit. It's bouncing between, it was running between 59 and 60. So it was not one consistent number all the time. Stop that. So this is going to have a little bit of a plus or minus to it. So I'm going to say again about 60 plus or minus. Perhaps it may be a little bit on the lower end because some of those were down, around 59 hertz. So somewhere in the 1180 to 1200 range. And let me put that in there. 1180 to 1200. Okay. All right. Then we'll look at the second example. That's running right in here. Pause that. Let's see where that lies. This one is looking, I got 79.5 or 6. 70, I'm going to say 79.6. So, 79.6 times 20. I'm coming with 1592. So for this one, I'm going to say 1592. Oh, sorry. Wrong column. 1592. Alright, and again, I want to do this just one more time, see how much this guy is moving around, because it's hard to hold the speed very constant. So actually at the end there it creeped up to about 80. So actually it could be as high as 1600. Again, this is probably all within the ability to measure this. So I'm going to say up to 1600-ish. So, okay. That is my prediction. So, I will now ask the official numbers. For test number 1, what was the actual measured speed?
Between 1190 and 1200.
1190 to 1200. Look at that. And for test number 2?
Between 1590 and 1600.
Look at that. You couldn't ask for a better result. So yes, you can determine engine speed by measuring the frequency of the exhaust. Thanks a lot. Bye.